The first time I slept with another man was the same day my husband rushed me to the hospital, thinking I was having an anxiety attack. It was a Tuesday in March. Gustavo, my husband, had come home from work early, which was unusual for him. He found me on the sofa, my hands trembling, my face pale. All I could think was, had he left a mark? Did I still smell of him? I wasn't afraid of what I had done. I was terrified that Gustavo would notice. He thought it was stress, or maybe a drop in blood pressure. He insisted on taking me to the hospital. In the car, he held my hand with a tenderness that made me nauseous. The doctor said everything was fine. Just exhaustion was the diagnosis. No one knew that. At 11:20 that morning, I was in a stranger's house, my lingerie on the floor. I didn't seek him out, or at least, that's what I like to tell myself. It happened during a routine check of the water heater. A tall technician, with large hands and an accent from the countryside. He spoke to me without rushing, without glancing at his watch. He looked at me as if he truly saw me, not as a mother or a wife, but just as me, Mariana. It was a silly conversation. I offered him coffee. He told me his hands were cold from working with metal all day. And when his fingers brushed against my wrist, I didn't pull away. It wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was an escape. For a few days, I questioned what I had done. But then, I felt alive. The problem wasn't what I did. The problem was that I didn't stop. Gustavo, so methodical and absorbed in his routine, didn't notice. At least, not at first. He was never a jealous or suspicious man, but he was obsessive about schedules. He always knew what time I left work, how long the 67 bus took, the exact number of minutes from the front gate to the sofa. If I was late, he would ask about it, his tone calm, but his eyes sharp. That was my first mistake. That Thursday, I told him I was going to a happy hour with the girls from work. It wasn't a total lie. One of them had organized a get-together, but I slipped away after the first glass of wine. I said I was tired, and while they were saying their goodbyes with kisses and emojis in the group chat, I was crossing the street to Ricardo's car. The technician. When I got home at 2 in the morning, my hair still smelling of his cologne, Gustavo was in the living room. The lights were off, except for his small reading lamp. He didn't say anything. He just looked up from his book and said, "I hope you had fun." I nodded, gave him a kiss on the forehead, and went straight to the bathroom. He didn't ask any questions that night, nor the next, but he started acting strangely. He didn't look at me the same way at the dinner table. He looked at me less. He started leaving his laptop in the living room, something he never did, and using it without headphones, as if he wanted me to hear what he was watching. Videos about things that never interested him before. Psychology, relationships, even a podcast about infidelity. I noticed, but I said nothing. I feigned indifference, though inside, something began to stir. It wasn't guilt. It was unease. I felt he had already sensed the shift. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in our room, I heard him on the phone with his sister. I'm sure he didn't know I was listening. He was saying, "I don't know, something's off with Mariana. She used to tell me everything. Now she barely talks. She goes out more. Sometimes I feel like she's avoiding me. I don't want to think the worst, but it's like she's somewhere else." I know what she's like when she's nervous. I can tell. I stood there, frozen, holding one of his shirts. It hurt to hear that, because there was no anger in his voice, only doubt and disappointment. Even so, I didn't feel remorse. I felt fear. Not that he would leave me, but that he would discover something I couldn't even explain to myself. The blow came the following Saturday. We were at my in-laws' house for the usual boring Sunday lunch, the kids running around in the garden. Gustavo was calm, even more talkative than usual, as if he were putting on a performance. I was on the sofa with his mother when he stood up and said, "I'm just going to pop over to the hardware store. I need something for the light switch." He left without any hurry. 20 minutes later, he came back. But he wasn't carrying a bag, and he didn't really come back. When he walked in, he had that look on his face, the one he gets when he's silent so he doesn't explode. He pulled me into a corner and said, "You're cheating on me, Mariana." Just like that. No preamble. I was paralyzed. I stared at him, unsure what expression to make. It wasn't the question. It was the tone. He was certain. "Why would you ask that?" I said, trying not to sound guilty, but it was useless. "Because I'm not an idiot," he replied. "And because I saw you, Mariana, today, getting out of a car that wasn't yours, kissing some guy, and it wasn't a friendly goodbye." I didn't know what to say. Literally, I wanted to say something, anything, but every thought sounded like an excuse. "Where were you?" I asked, out of pure reflex. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and pain. "I followed you. When you said you were going to buy a new pair of pants, it didn't feel right. So I followed you." The worst part is, I wasn't even surprised. I just needed the confirmation. I swallowed hard. I felt something tighten in my stomach, but it wasn't sadness. It was a kind of horrible relief. I didn't have to hide anymore. But at what cost? "How long?" he asked. "How long have you not cared about any of this?" At that, I couldn't keep up the act. "I don't know, Gustavo. It started without a plan. I didn't want to hurt you." That last sentence slipped out, and I regretted it instantly, because that's what set him off. "You didn't want to hurt me? Are you taking me for a fool?" He grabbed my arm, his grip firm but not painful. "You think this doesn't hurt me? Sleeping with another man and then coming home, kissing my children, sleeping next to me? You call that not hurting me?" I didn't know how to answer. I just lowered my head. He let go of my arm and took a step back. "Tell me, Mariana, did you fall in love with him?" I shook my head. "No, it wasn't love. It never was." "Then why?" he demanded. "What on earth was going through your head to make you throw all this away?" I looked at him, with fear, with anger, with helplessness. "I don't know, Gustavo. I felt invisible. I felt like another piece of furniture in this house. I didn't do it for revenge. It, it just happened." We stood there in silence. My in-laws were still in the living room. They knew nothing, but the two of us, in that hallway, were no longer the same. "This isn't over, Mariana," he said, and walked to his car. That's when I knew the fall had only just begun. Gustavo didn't come home that night. He didn't answer my texts. I didn't call. I wouldn't have known what to say. I sat for hours on the sofa, the children asleep upstairs, staring at my phone screen without touching it, waiting for the sound of a key in the lock that never came. I got up at 6, made coffee I didn't drink, and prepared the kids' breakfast as if nothing had happened. I drove them to school with a smile that ached. I was shattered, but I wouldn't let it show. When I returned, Gustavo's car was in the driveway. My legs trembled as I walked up the stairs. I entered our bedroom and saw him sitting on the bed, still in yesterday's clothes. His eyes were swollen. I couldn't tell if it was from lack of sleep or from crying. He didn't say a word when he saw me, and neither did I. I closed the door and remained standing. I wanted him to speak first, but he stayed silent. I walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. Then, without looking at me, he said, "I've already spoken to a lawyer." I froze. He says, if there's proof of infidelity, the settlement changes. Custody, assets, everything. Are you going to do that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Are you going to take the children from me? Gustavo finally turned to look at me. His eyes were empty, with no trace of the man he had been. I don't know, Mariana. I don't want to hurt them, but I can't live with this. This isn't just some argument. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I couldn't argue. He stood up, went to the closet, and started putting clothes into a duffel bag. Are you leaving? I asked. Yeah, he said, not looking at me. I'm going to my sister's for a few days, until I figure out what to do with all this. I moved closer. Gustavo, I wasn't thinking. I didn't plan any of it. It just, he let out a bitter laugh. That much is clear. You did it without thinking, as if you had no family, no children, no husband, as if all of this was disposable. I touched his arm. He pulled away with a sharp gesture, not violent, but decisive. Don't. Don't do that. Don't touch me. Don't come to me with affection now. You lied to me. For weeks, maybe months, you lied to my face. And now you want me to understand? I just want you to listen to me, I pleaded. I am listening, he shot back. But everything coming out of your mouth sounds hollow. You deceived me, Mariana. You slept with me after being with him. What kind of person does that? I had so many things to say, but none of them mattered. Nothing could justify what I had done. Not the boredom, not the routine, not the feeling of emptiness. Nothing. And that was the worst part. I couldn't defend myself without sounding pathetic. I don't love him, I said. I don't even know why I kept seeing him. He doesn't complete me. He isn't better than you, or smarter, or more handsome. He looked at me. He talked to me. He made me feel something, even if it was a lie. Gustavo turned and looked at me again. And me? Did I not talk to you? Did I not look at you? Didn't I do everything for this family? Yes, I said. You did everything for everyone, except for yourself. You forgot about yourself, Gustavo. You became a robot. Schedules, tasks, routines. We never went out. We never talked. You were always present. But it was like you weren't here, as if the only thing that mattered was that everything ran smoothly. And that justifies sleeping with someone else? No, I said. It doesn't justify it. I'm just trying to understand it myself. He fell silent, then picked up his bag. I don't know if I'm coming back, he said, and walked out. The days that followed were a living hell. My children asked about their father. I made up excuses. Gustavo didn't block my number, but he didn't reply to anything. One night, I decided to go to his sister's house. He opened the door and looked at me without a word. Can we talk? I asked. He hesitated for a second, then stepped aside to let me in. We sat in silence in the living room, like two strangers. I'm not asking you to forgive me, I began. I just want to understand what happens now. He sighed. I don't know either. Part of me wants to make you pay for this. Another part just wants to disappear. But the kids are here. They're not to blame for your decisions. Are you going to tell them? I asked. Not now, he said, but I can't promise I won't if this all turns into a war. I suggested we try therapy. He said he didn't know if he wanted to save anything, that he wasn't sure there was anything left to save. I don't trust you anymore, Mariana, he told me. And if there's no trust, what's left? I had no answer. I left his sister's house, knowing that nothing would ever be the same, and that I probably deserved every second of this. A week after he left, Gustavo came back home unannounced. It was 11 in the morning. I was working from my home office, wearing headphones. I saw him enter out of the corner of my eye. He made no sound, offered no greeting, didn't even look at me. He went straight to his room. I stayed still, unsure if I should get up, ask him something, or pretend nothing was happening. I took a deep breath. A few minutes later, he came out with a thick folder, put it in his backpack, and just as he was about to leave, he finally spoke to me. You need to be at the lawyer's office on Monday at 5 in the afternoon. His tone was dry, firm, like someone giving an order. What for? I asked. To sign the agreement, he said. I want to get this over with as quickly as possible. I was speechless. I knew this could happen, but not so fast. What agreement? Shared custody, division of assets, use of the house, all legal. I stood up slowly. Gustavo, this is so drastic. Can't we talk more? See a couples therapist? Try something before jumping to the end? He looked at me with a mixture of disdain and exhaustion. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new stage where I no longer have to look at you and think about how you lied to me every single day. It's an attempt to live in peace. Is that what you want? I insisted. Is there really nothing left that ties you to what we were? Gustavo didn't answer. He simply opened the door and left. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse. It was coldness. On Monday, I went to the office as he had asked. A woman greeted me and handed me a stack of papers. I recognized Gustavo's handwriting in the margins of the documents. It was a detailed agreement, meticulously planned, with clear, precise language. No room for argument. He wasn't fighting me for anything. He was leaving me the car, the house, the furniture. All he asked for was equal time with the children and no alimony, since we both worked. I felt sick, not because of what he was asking for, but because of what he was leaving behind. It felt as though everything we had built together held no value for him anymore, as if he preferred to hand it all over, just to sever ties completely. The lawyer assured me that the agreement was legally sound. It only awaited my signature. As I finished reading, Gustavo entered the room, dressed in a suit, white shirt, and neatly combed hair, his eyes shadowed by dark circles. He sat across from me without meeting my gaze. Have you read it? He asked. I nodded. What do you think? It's fair, I replied. So you'll sign? He pressed. I hesitated, then said, yes. Perfect, he said. Then this all ends today. He picked up the folder and waited. I stood, looking at him. Is that it? I asked. No, he replied. He handed me a flash drive. I recommend you watch it at home, alone. And afterward, don't call me again. It's all been said. I left without another word. The drive home was a relentless loop of dark thoughts. When I arrived, I locked myself in my room and plugged the drive into my laptop. It took a few seconds to load. Folders appeared, labeled with names like records, calls, messages, videos, audios, and screenshots. I opened one. It contained screen captures of my conversations with Ricardo, some recent, some old, all meticulously organized. Then came the audios, recordings of conversations I hadn't known were being captured, some from inside a car, others from speakerphone calls, and the videos, hidden camera footage, likely from our living room. My blood ran cold. One showed me on a video call with Ricardo, laughing, saying I couldn't wait to see him again. Another captured me, changing clothes in the bedroom while responding to his message. Everything had timestamps, dates, and context. Gustavo hadn't shouted or hurled insults. He hadn't smashed anything. Instead, he had recorded, archived, and exposed it all with surgical precision, like a professional operation. Now, he delivered it to me as a verdict, so I could see, understand, and never deny it. He didn't just leave. He dismantled me emotionally, cleanly, and methodically, without a scene. That hurt more than any outburst. The next morning brought another blow. Opening my work email, I found a notification from Human Resources with an attached file. It was a formal letter. My contract was temporarily suspended pending an internal investigation. They provided no details, but I knew immediately. One of the videos clearly showed me using the company's meeting room after hours to meet Ricardo. The location was unmistakable, and I'd claimed that night was a team dinner. I didn't know how Gustavo had obtained it, whether he'd leaked it himself or through someone else. But it no longer mattered. The damage was done. I spent the rest of the day motionless on the sofa, feeling hollow, erased, as if my betrayal defined me entirely. Gustavo's silence had been a calculated punishment. He hadn't merely walked away. He ensured I paid the full price, making me confront every detail of what I'd destroyed. A week later, on Tuesday, Gustavo came to collect some boxes he'd left in the storage. I was in the kitchen when I heard the door open with his key. I stayed put, but waited. After a few minutes, he descended, grabbed the boxes, and walked past me without a word. I followed him to the entrance. As he set the boxes down to close the door, I said, "Gustavo, wait." He paused, hand on the knob. "Can we talk for 5 minutes?" I asked. He didn't agree, but he didn't refuse. He closed the door and turned. "5 minutes," he said, unmoving. I leaned against the wall, a few steps away. I know I can't ask for forgiveness, not after everything, and certainly not after what you did. I'm not justifying myself. What I did was a betrayal, and I don't expect you to understand. I just want you to know it hurts me, not just for what happened, but for how I failed you. His expression didn't change. "And what good does that do now?" he asked. "Do you think feeling bad will make things go back to how they were?" I shook my head. "I know it won't, but I needed to say it. I've lost everyone's respect, even the kids. I've lost my job, and you probably don't want to look at me ever again. I just want to close this face to face, not in silence." He sat on the edge of the sofa. He didn't invite me, but I sat at the other end anyway. After a long silence, he spoke without looking at me. "I've been thinking about this too. It wasn't easy for me. I had to fight the urge to break everything, to say all the things I thought. to hurt you with words. But in the end, it felt like a waste of energy because you've already done it to yourself. I swallowed hard. I know. And it's not just about what you did with him. It's about the months you pretended, the excuses you made, the faces you wore while I confided in you. You stripped away my dignity without a sound, my peace without destruction. You took yourself from me without ever leaving. I had no response. I wanted to say, it wasn't premeditated, that I hadn't meant to demolish our relationship, but it would have been a lie. He rubbed his face. I've spent nights wondering if it was my fault, if my being so methodical, so focused on the kids, made you feel alone. And then I realized that even if it was, you had 1,000 ways to talk about it, to say something, to face it. But you chose another path, and that changes everything. I fought the urge to reach for his hand. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I asked. I don't know, he replied. I won't answer now because I don't want to give you false hope. Today I can't. Today, I'm just figuring out how to start over without dragging this with me. Almost whispering, I asked, do you think we can still be a family for the kids? Yes, he said. For them, yes. I don't want them to live with hate, to see one parent as the enemy. But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you. It means their stability matters more than my pain. The conversation lingered for several minutes. I asked if he was seeing anyone, if he was thinking of starting a new relationship. He said no, that he was focused on reclaiming his peace. He asked if I was still in touch with Ricardo. I told him no, that I'd cut off contact completely since learning what he'd uncovered. He didn't fully believe me, but it seemed irrelevant. This isn't about him, he said. It's about you. If not him, it would have been someone else because it was your choice, not a coincidence. When he stood to leave, he looked at me for the first time that afternoon. Mariana, I'm telling you truthfully. I don't wish you suffering. I don't want to see you suffer, but I can't be near you. You remind me of the worst thing I've ever lived. My eyes welled up. I understand. As he picked up the boxes and opened the door, he added, I'm changing my phone number. If the kids need anything, I'll use email. I don't want to cut everything off, but I can't see you every week. It's not revenge. It's for my sanity. I had no words. I heard him walk away, get into his car, and drive off. For once, I didn't collapse or cry right away. I just sat there, realizing there was nothing left to say. 3 weeks have passed since that last conversation with Gustavo, and my life has become a blank expanse where I try to comprehend how I reached this point. I don't wake up each morning thinking of him, or Ricardo, or the family we had. I wake up wondering how to get through the day without feeling that everything I touch crumbles. I rise in a bed I once shared with someone who knew me in my silences. But now, I share neither memories nor space. There are no messages, no calls, no one asks how I am. The kids are adapting to this absurd routine where their parents are apart, but mask it with forced smiles and makeshift meals. The hardest part isn't what's broken. It's the piece of me that doesn't know if I can ever fix it. I work in silence, like a temporary employee in my own life. I shop, wash dishes, check the kids' homework, and avoid any mirror that might demand honest reflection. Ricardo tried calling once. I didn't answer. He sent a message saying he didn't understand what happened, that he just wanted to be with me. I didn't respond. Not because I hoped to mend things with Gustavo, but because I realized Ricardo was never truly important, just a poorly chosen escape. If I saw him on the street, I wouldn't know what to say. He wasn't to blame for my infidelity. I chose him. I chose this mess. Every decision was mine, every consequence mine alone. One afternoon, while the kids were with Gustavo, I sat in the kitchen with a notebook and pen. I began writing all the things I wished I'd said to him before signing the papers. Not to give to him, but to understand myself. I wrote that I admired how he was the anchor of our family, how his silences once gave me peace, and that when I drifted away, it wasn't from lack of love, but from my own inability to admit I needed help, that I was empty and didn't know how to ask. I wrote that I never wanted to see him broken, that I hadn't imagined he'd retaliate as he did, and that while it hurt, I understood it was his way of making me feel what he'd endured. I don't know if he'll ever read it. Maybe he shouldn't, but writing it helped. The kids ask less now. At first, they looked at me strangely, as if waiting for me to say it was all a misunderstanding and their father would return. Now, they just adapt. I try to give them stability, to be present, not to cry in front of them, but I know they've changed. I see it in how they speak, how they say goodbye, how they ask about weekends at their father's or mine. I've taken from them the idea of a united family, and there's no way to give it back. Gustavo keeps his commitments. He picks them up on time, speaks kindly, cares for them, but he doesn't enter the house, not even for a quick hello. He declines invitations to birthdays or school events. He does it all from a distance. Sometimes, I think this punishment is worse than any shout. My job remains suspended. The internal investigation stalled because they found no evidence I'd harmed performance or committed a serious offense, but they offered voluntary severance with minimal terms. I accepted without argument. I had no fight left. I've searched for other work, updated my resume, attended interviews, but it's not easy to step out into the world carrying the mark of someone who threw away their life for something unworthy. Some nights, I wake and it all feels like a distant dream, as if it happened to another person. Then I look around and realize it's real. This house is emptier because I emptied it. I have no long-term plan. I don't know if I'll rebuild my life, trust again, or find a way to forgive myself. But I know nothing I do can repair what's broken. I can only try not to damage what's left. Two children who need a present, coherent, sincere mother, even if she's imperfect, even if she's failed. I don't want them to remember me for the harm, but for what I tried to rebuild afterward. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'll try. And if Gustavo ever crosses that door again, perhaps to talk, to see me without resentment, to share a meal without tension, I'll know at least part of this was worth it. But if he doesn't, if he chooses a path away from mine, I'll accept it. For the first time in years, I know I deserve it. And knowing that, even if it hurts, is the start of something more real than all that came before.